They call us the forgotten generation, Gen X. But if you look at the world today, we're actually the bridge generation. I spent my career as a sergeant major in the United States Army Special Forces. I was a Green Beret, an Army Ranger, and I was also my last 7 years in Special Operations on a Tier 1 team. I won't go into detail what that was, but we learned in our generation how to never quit. It didn't start in boot camp. It started on a 10-speed bike in the 1970s, 1980s. I grew up in a world without iPhones, without GPS, and without a safety net. We learned to navigate life when it was analog, and we mastered it when it turned digital. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into the nostalgia that shaped us, from the board of education in Catholic schools to the sheer boredom that turned us into the inventors. This isn't just a trip down memory lane, y'all. It's a breakdown of the Gen X grit that no other generation has or ever will have. All right, let's talk about our generation. We're still young enough to understand a lot of things. We're still young enough to remember pretty much everything that shaped us, all the good times and bad. But I really remember my childhood years, my teenage years. I just remembered it being, I don't know, not full of drama. I don't recall any drama in my lifetime as a child. You know, I can honestly say I had a great childhood. I really did. You know, as disciplined and hardcore my dad was, and my mom wasn't. She was the soft-spoken one and the comforter. Typical mom. I love both parents to death, and I'm so proud of my parents. I'm proud of my dad and mom. But the crap that we had to go through back in our days, could you imagine the kids nowadays having to go through even a fraction of the stuff that we went through? Take, for instance, when I went to school, elementary school, I went to a Catholic school my whole 8 years, and we actually got paddled. They would paddle us for the most basic, mundane things. I can recall in first grade, my teacher, which was a nun, Sister Norman Jean, picked my desk up. If y'all remember the old desk, you know how they had the big kind of weird rectangular shape and with the lid, and they lift it up and you put all your crap inside. But I can recall my teacher, Sister Norman Jean, picking my desk up and launching it across the classroom like a goddamn drill sergeant. And I remember the sheer terror that I felt because of my desk being messy. I thought, oh shit. I remember the trouble that I got into just from that alone. That one particular event shaped the rest of the course of my life, as far as taking care of my things, making sure things are orderly, making sure things are organized. And that one single event did that. Terrifying, yes, but a learning experience for the best, absolutely. And that helped me out more than 10 drill sergeants could ever pound in my head about, keeping things orderly, taking care of your equipment, making sure your weapon's clean, blah, 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 blah. That teacher, Sister Norma Jean, was the best drill sergeant I ever had, hands down. And I can honestly say that as a Tier 1 United States Army Special Operations operator, say that she was the toughest drill sergeant I ever had. Highest level of military training there is. Maybe I'm going out on a limb saying that, but yeah, I mean, for my age, for everything, that single-handedly did it for me. So hopefully there's a lot of people out there that knows what I'm talking about. I'm sure there is. I remember getting paddled multiple times in grade school for stupid stuff like being on recess and picking on a girl, or you know what I'm talking about, and then getting paddled for something like that, or getting paddled for saying a cuss word. I remember my dad, he was our football coach when I was in fourth grade, and I called my friend mother effer, but I didn't call it to him. I spelled it out to him. I said MOTHERFUC, blah blah blah. So my dad made me run 14 laps around this park where we used to practice playing football, and I'm not exactly sure how long the distance was for each lap, but it seemed like it was a mile, but I'm sure it wasn't. But I think I learned true friendship in the 4th grade. How friends will screw you over in a split second to get themselves ahead. That's when I learned true friendship. Who my true friends were and weren't, and he obviously wasn't, because a true friend would never do that to a buddy. I know I never would, never have, and I never will. And I could give you every friend that knows me, and they would tell you right now that Mike would never screw them over in a split second, and I'd give you everything in my bank account if you needed it. But that's neither here nor there. I just remember, having a basic group of friends in our neighborhood growing up. We would do things. We'd play wiffle ball. We'd play games that I'm not going to mention here, but it's called Smear the Blank. You can pretty much figure out what that is. We weren't politically correct in our day, were we? And I think politically correct terms has gotten out of control. It's gotten so out of control that it's a joke. It's a freaking joke. Talking about political correctness and saying you can't say this, or you can't say that, or you gotta call them this, or you gotta call them that, and it's like, come on, man, seriously. We grew up in the era where there was Republicans and Democrats, but I don't recall one side hating each other so bad they wanted them dead, like now. Like they want to unalive us. They want to revoke our birth certificate so bad. If I voted for Donald Trump, then I'm a marked man. Growing up in the 80s was like the Wild West. We didn't have too many rules, right? What our parents tell us, when you see the street lights come on, it's time to come home. I remember running around our neighborhood with my friends, trying to hurry up and get home before the street lights came on, so you didn't get in trouble. Playing wiffle ball with my buddies, playing Smear the what. Just the hours and like limitless time that we had when we were playing together. Seemed like there was never an end to it. We didn't have cell phones, we didn't have GPS. We had to rely on our basic, I don't know what you want to call it. I guess that's when you learned to get street smart, back when you was a kid back in the 80s. You learned that you can't well, obviously we didn't have cell phones or GPS and none of that crap, so we had to either know our surroundings, we had to get to know our surroundings. Always had to have a quarter that we could carry with us in case we needed to call home on a payphone, which most kids nowadays don't even know what a payphone is. It's like it is an antique now, seeing a payphone. And like, what? Like my kids will say, what the hell is that? Type thing. And it's like, oh, that's a payphone. Yeah, you used to put a quarter in, you could call home, call anywhere you wanted, let somebody know where you was at. And that's how we contacted each other. We didn't have to worry about text messaging each other every 5 seconds or any of that crap. We didn't have to worry about carrying our phone with us everywhere we went, and always being connected. Having that disconnect, I think, I don't know, is like freedom. Whereas now, you're always connected. I guess it's some sort of a sense of security almost now. But in some ways, I feel like I'm imprisoned. The more I'm connected, the more I feel imprisoned. Like I can't get away. I don't know, it's weird, isn't it? Maps. Does anybody know how to read a map? Kids, if you told them a street address, they don't even know how to read a map. They don't even know what the directions are. Like if you want to see a street, like yeah, it's in the 1,000 block of this and this, or it's in 1,000 block north, 1,000 block west. They wouldn't know how to figure that out. Whereas stuff like that, we were taught as kids. I know I was. We didn't worry about having to go to the convenience store to get water or anything like that. We'd just get the goddamn garden hose and turn it on and start drinking away. We didn't think about chemicals or lead poisoning or any of that crap. We just drank right from the water hose, Nowadays you got all this no BPA bullshit, and it's just, things have gotten too complicated, for lack of a better term. Things are way too complicated now. With technology, it's supposed to create simplicity. In some ways it does, because I am in the technology space, I guess. But it also creates an immense amount of complexity. Yeah, complexity. Having to know too much, having to be connected too much, having to know too much can cause too much complexity. Whereas before, you didn't need to know any of this crap because there was none of this crap. So that was the beauty about being from the 80s. We learned how to type on actual typewriters, like legit typewriters with the little bars, the keys that would hit the ribbon and whatnot. Then you remember the word processors, the electronic word processors were it was an electronic typewriter, basically. I remember those. I remember seeing those at my dad's police station where he worked at. He was a police officer for 25 years, and I remember seeing the technology they had back in the 80s when I was a kid, going over there, how advanced and whatnot I thought that was. Just seeing that kind of stuff, which it was highly advanced, needed to be for obvious reasons. Talking about the old neighborhood stuff, our old neighborhood, our old friends and stuff, how foolish a lot of us were. We would make, out of boredom comes a lot of stupid, inventive things. Me personally, I remember building ramps as high as I think I could make them, out of pieces of plywood and cinder blocks and anything else we could find around the neighborhood or around my mom and dad's house. We'd make these ramps to jump our bikes on, no matter. We didn't care how inexperienced we were as, riding bicycles. We thought we were, Evel Knievel. He was big back in the 80s. It was Evel Knievel. And every boy I knew wanted to be Evel Knievel. And we would, a lot of us tried launching ourselves into the atmosphere. Most of us failed. I remember my best friend at the time come all the way from probably, I don't know, it seemed like 100 yards away from down one end of the street. And he said, "Mike, watch this." And he starts pedaling his bike as fast as he could. I remember he hits this jump. He hits it and he goes straight up in the air, and then he comes straight down, like straight up, straight down, like kind of like it was in like one of them old time movies, but that's kind of how it looked in real life. And he came down. I remember he broke his collarbone and stuff, and broke his collarbone and I think his wrist at the time. But I just remember that. And I remember a lot of stupid stuff that I did. I started riding motorcycles, like these little mini bikes. A friend of mine had a mini bike, and so I wanted to get one. So I told my mom and dad I would do everything. I would work all summer, to pay back if they would help me buy this old mini bike. So they did. They bought me a mini bike, and it was a little Honda. Can't remember the model name, but it was a little XR80 or some shit like that. It was like a dirt bike, but you could also take it on the streets and stuff, you know. So it wasn't a full-fledged motocross bike. And I'll get to that here in a second about motocross. But so I started riding that, and we start taking around these trails and stuff, and jump these big jumps and whatnot. You know, we thought they were big, and I thought at the time, man, I've gotten pretty good at this stuff. I think I'm ready to, you know, propel my experience into the next level. So I begged and pleaded and everything to my mom and dad. I said, Mom, Dad, can I get rid of this bike? And I want to get a full-fledged motocross motorcycle. And I remember at the time it was a YZ100 Yamaha 100. And my dad, he went and bought a brand new YZ100 for me, dirt bike, motocross bike. And I told him, I said, I will do everything I can to pay you guys back. And I'll work any type of jobs that I could. I was 13 years old. So I did paper routes and did stuff around our neighborhood, you know, cutting grass and shoveling snow, things like that. And I did. I paid him back for this dirt bike. And so I started racing motocross. You know, I failed more times than I did good, but I did start getting good at it. And, you know, I kept advancing. I went from the 100 class, 100B to 100A class, and then went to 125B, and then 125A, which A class is the obviously better riders than the B riders. And you would advance in your motocross class. That's how they did it. They didn't want guys to just totally dominate. You know, if you got too good in the B class, then they're going to move you up to the A class because, you know, it's not fair, right? And, you know, just because you show up, you didn't get a trophy. Not like now. Like, you know, if you had 20 riders show up back then, only the first 3 riders would, you know, get trophies. You know, first, second, third. Nowadays, they'd give it to every rider out there just to participate, right? You know, because they wouldn't want to offend anybody. But that's the difference between then and now. But so I get really good in my motocross endeavors back when I was a teenager, and I started racing. Then I was in 125A's class, and went to 125 semi-pros, and ended up going. I went up to the 250 pro class and racing a supercross race. And that's when I realized that I was way out of my element. I thought I was good until I went up against the guys that were actually good. And I got humbled real fast. You know, how not good that I actually was. Maybe I was good in my own little element, but back here at home, but when you're on the national circuit and stuff, you know, you're just a small fish in a big pond. So I did that, you know, as most of my, I did do that my entire teenage years. Do y'all remember doing the Pledge of Allegiance in school? I remember doing that every day. You know, every morning I would be so proud to saying the Pledge of Allegiance. You know, even though I didn't really know exactly what a lot of the words meant, you know, but I just knew that it was something good, and it was something of who I was, who we were, and you just get a sense of pride in being an American, you know. And then that got all taken away by one kid. One kid got that taken away. One communist, his parents or his dad was a communist, said it was unconstitutional. By God, they got that taken out of schools. One kid. You get 10 million kids that love saying the Pledge of Allegiance, but one kid doesn't like it or it offends them, and they took it away. To me, that's un-American. I think that should be prerequisite to be a child in this country, is to say the Pledge of Allegiance every day. I think every child, every American needs to say that every single day. so they know who they are and what they come from. The people that have sacrificed this country to make it what we are. And that's what's wrong with our country is too much has gotten away. Too much politics has gotten in the way. Too many people's feelings have gotten away. Too many foreigners are in our government now that should not be. That's not the government's fault. That's our fault as a country. The people that run the country, and that's us. We the people are the first three words of the Constitution. We the people. And that's us. But we failed to do anything about it. But yet we can do something about it. We just don't do nothing about it. Coming from the 80s, like I said, we had two sides, Democrats, Republicans, back then too. And we were never hating on each other. I always felt a sense of pride as a kid, just being an American, just living here in America, knowing that I'm an American, how well we actually have it compared to a lot of people. Even though I have not experienced none of the stuff that I've experienced in my life at that point, I just knew, from the people, the stories that I've heard, the people that I was raised by, my mom and dad, my grandparents, relatives, godfathers, just, neighbors. I just knew that what being American actually was, and you took pride in that. And nowadays it's just an afterthought. It's just, it's like a burden to even tell somebody about it, to talk about it. It's a burden to the person that's talking about it. I mean, I didn't raise my kids that way. My kids are as American as I am, as red-blooded as I am. And they're going to teach their kids, and they have. I've got a 4-year-old grandson that's as American as I am, and we'll tell you that. At least in my world, I can contribute that and continue that on. And I wish other people would do the same. And I know there are a lot of us out there that do that. A lot of things need to change. We're from the last generation. We grew up without technology, but we grew into it as we worked and grew up. We kind of grew up into technology with the computers. Of course, we had computers in high school, but nothing like what we have now. Then the internet, then we had the cell phones, and now we got all this other advanced stuff. Now we have AI that can create anything you want. So we've seen a lot in our generation. We've had to learn a lot. And, learning AI, learning all this stuff is kind of a whole new frontier for a lot of us. I know it is for me, but I did learn it because I knew I had to learn it. I had to learn all this stuff. Yeah, I can recall in the early 90s, in between wars and stuff, I was on a team in the Army that we was testing out GPS before GPS became a thing. We were actually one of the first teams that was testing it out, and we were testing it out in the Mojave Desert and other places around, and how it worked. And they would have GPS software or whatever. I don't even think it was called software back at the time. I forget what they called it, but they had GPS inside of our radios and our, how we communicated with each other. And I remember at the time that they said, yeah, if you, you're out here doing something and you need a, emergency, something happens, all you got to do is hit this button on your radio, and it will instantly send a signal back to your command showing your exact location. And I remember how, like, at the time I thought, oh my God, how this is intense. This is absolutely insane that they can know exactly where I'm at all times. Technology in the military is always way far advanced than what we have out here in the civilian world. Like some of the stuff that we tested, some of the things that I tested, next level. I mean, stuff that's so top secret you don't even want to know. But GPS is one of those that I can honestly talk about that blew my mind. Just for the sheer fact that, I knew it was like, holy shit, somebody's going to know my exact whereabouts 24/7. Because, growing up in the generation we did, we weren't used to people knowing our every step. You know what I mean? You had a quarter with you. Some of us had quarters with us. Some of us didn't. Like if we had to call our parents, say, "Oh, I'm running late. I'm over here at so and so's house," or we're over here at the library and we got caught up in studying or whatnot, and so we weren't used to being tracked. Constant surveillance or whatever you want to call it. And speaking of the library, what about that Dewey Decimal System? Could you imagine trying to teach that nowadays to a kid? The Dewey Decimal System. I remember having to learn that in school. How much of I don't know what you want to call it, but how much of a mind fuck that thing was to a kid, trying to learn that. It's like, my God, this is too complex for me. And here I was, I don't know, 12, 13 years old, learning the Dewey Decimal System so I could, check out books in the library. I don't even know if they even have it anymore. I don't even know if it's even relevant. I don't think it would be relevant nowadays, because if you want to look for something, all you gotta simply do is type it in, like, keyword, and it pulls whatever up you're wanting to find. You got 1,000 different choices here. So the Dewey Decimal System, as far as I know, is obsolete. A lot of things that we grew up with is obsolete. Obviously, phone booths are definitely obsolete. I haven't seen a payphone in, God, it's been a long time since I've seen payphones. What else is obsolete? I mean, there's a lot of things from our youth that is obsolete. Like these, okay, look at the cartoons that we grew up with. Look at all the cartoons that we grew up with, how violent they were, but yet they were so funny. The Bugs Bunny, the Roadrunner, top named cartoons, and how violent they were, but yet we all turned out fine. But nowadays, if you show that, it's like, oh my God, I can't believe you're showing that to a kid. You're a horrible person for showing a Roadrunner getting chased by this coyote. The coyote's trying to kill him. It's like, oh my God, it's a freaking cartoon, man. It's like, again, it's political correctness single-handedly ruined a lot about our country. Is political correctness. I seen it coming back in the early 90s when Bill Clinton became president. I seen all that political correctness starting. I was in the military and I seen it slowly being, phased into the military. And, of course, we didn't have women in our military in what I did, but, we had women on our, support battalion, like that did HR stuff or maybe supply or something like that, or cooks, whatnot. And I remember like how much trouble we'd get into if we said a off-color joke around a woman. It's like, what? It's like, so if I say a joke to a buddy of mine, about something juvenile, harmless, if I say a joke and a woman overhears it, she can actually say she's offended by it and I get in trouble. What the hell? This is the death of America right here. This was in 1993, I believe, when I said that. This is the death of America happening. And here we are, 2026, and we're still doing it. How is America going to be in 10 years from now? It's hard to say. It's hard to say how America's going to be in 10 years from now. It really is. Just when you think you got a president in there that's going to do what they say they're going to do, like him or not, I think our president now has done a lot for our country. But I also think he's sold us out too. I think he's doing it for his own personal gain. I think a lot of the promises that he's made is definitely going unchecked. You know, like getting rid of all these illegal aliens. I mean, we've had other presidents that are Democrats that have done far better at getting illegals out of our country with no drama whatsoever. I know a lot of the drama is created because of who the president is too. I do know that, but still, he's a showman. He's a showman, and he wants to be heard. You know, he wants this. He wants all the fame and glory directed towards him, and that's fine. I never liked him as a person. You know, because in most Americans would never be able to relate to someone like him because he's so out of touch with how the average American lives and, you know, talks and acts and everything. So, you know, you kind of got to separate that from, I know I always have, I've separated that from the actual person because I knew, okay, well, this guy, he's never lived the life we've had. He has no idea what it takes to have to decide whether he should put gas in the car or should he buy an extra couple things to eat. Yeah, he's never had to decide that because he's always been wealthy, you know. And I think all presidents are like that. I think all people in politics are like that. That's why nothing gets done because politicians are so out of tune with who we are as Americans. I just know it seemed like in the 1980s growing up, you know, when we had Reagan as our president, you know, we had the Soviet Union, constant fear of nuclear war. You know, you heard about that a lot, but you never really felt threatened. I mean, I didn't. I never felt threatened. I always felt secure and safe, sound, and I knew that our president was going to always have our back, no matter what. I always thought that. I never thought one time did I think that we were going to get annihilated by the Russians. But can I say that now? No. I'm more scared now. I'm more scared for our country, for the future of our country, for the future for my kids and my grandkids and my fellow Americans. That's what I'm scared for. What the future is going to be like. I just hope it's the same America that we grew up with. You know, that's what I want. I want to have the same America that we all grew up with. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect, but it doesn't have to be so divided like it is either. And I think that's all done by design too. This division in America, I think the politicians want us to be divided because then we're attacking each other and our attention's on each other, you know, ranting and raving in social media instead of directing our attention towards them as we should as Americans. As their boss, we should be directing all our attention to them, but we don't. Instead, we're bickering at our moms and dads or brothers and sisters or friends that are, so you're a Democrat, I'm a Republican, so let's argue amongst each other and create this huge echo chamber of hate amongst each other. That's what they've caused in America, and it's the politicians that's done that to us. You know, it's the media that's done that to us. They want us to be divided like we are. Obviously the media does, so now that you got news to talk about, the politicians do, so now we can't be scrutinizing all their corruption that they're doing every day, because all you got to do is do a little Google searches and you'll see how much corruption that they do every day to us. You know, I blame us American citizens for everything that's going on right now. I do. We're responsible for everything that's happened to us. We could change it for whatever reason. You know, everybody claims they don't have the time. Oh, they got a wife and kids, and I can't take off time to go protest in Washington or go show up on the Capitol doorsteps one day. You know, like Could you imagine if 1 million of us showed up on the Capitol doorsteps one day, said enough is enough? They would all shit their pants, and they would. If 1 million Americans showed up on the doorsteps there, they would have to change something. They would have to, because they knew what the next thing would be, and I don't think anybody wants that. How do you think they did back in the 1800s? When the people that they elected and they go to D.C. to do the politicking, and if they didn't, the people back home, getting the right things done, do you think they just stood there and said, well, I'll get you next election, I'll shake my fist and get you? No, they didn't. They took action. They'd go to Washington, D.C., yank them out of office, and made sure they never ran for office again, because they weren't capable of running again after what they'd done to them. I'm not saying that's what we should do now, but a lot of things gonna have to change. We grew up without the internet, with all this mass amount of information now at our fingertips, and now we have it, which is more power than is imaginable, because we can find things out in a split second. Instead of taking action, all we do is post it on social media, like, oh my God, can you believe so-and-so did this or said that? No, we need to take action instead of, bitching about it on Twitter or X or Instagram or Facebook or whatever. We need to take action. We didn't just grow up in our generation. We were forged. Our generation, we were forged. And so we know how to deal with a lot of stuff, a lot of crap. We know how to deal with a lot of changes. I think our generation is a dying breed, people like us. Anyway, if y'all like this video, hit the subscribe button. I'd appreciate it. If y'all's ever been paddled in school, send me a comment down in the comments, and let's talk about those experiences together. And like I said, like my video, subscribe. I'd greatly appreciate it, because I am a new channel, and I like to get my channel out there to the masses, to the other Gen X people. Thank you for your time. Thanks for watching my video, and I will see you in my next one.